Return to the Shanhai Pass, the gate where the wall meets the sea. Static shot, the water beyond it. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does leave instructions. The Ming left theirs carved in stone across 13,000 miles of northern China. The instructions are specific. They say, a wall is not a strategy. It is a substitute for one. And the moment you mistake the substitute for the real thing, you have already lost. You just don't know it yet. The question isn't whether the Great Wall was an extraordinary feat of human construction. It was. The question is what we chose to remember about it, and what we chose to forget. If history got the most famous wall ever built this wrong, if the myth survived this long despite the evidence, what other monuments are we still worshiping that were hollow from the start? Tell me in the comments. Tomorrow, we uncover the empire that rewrote its own collapse and made the world believe it was a golden age. The most famous wall in human history was never breached. Not once. Not by the Xiongnu. Not by the Mongols. Not by the Manchu. In over 2,000 years of warfare along China's northern frontier, no army ever broke through the Great Wall of China by force. They didn't have to. Because every single time the wall fell, and it fell repeatedly, decisively, and completely, someone on the inside opened a gate. Iron, ancient, a key turning in slow motion. No context. No caption. Then, at the cut, a single low percussion hit. One. Then nothing again. Think about what that means. The largest construction project in human history. 2,000 years of imperial obsession. Hundreds of billions in modern equivalent spending. The forced labor of millions of people, some of whom were buried inside the very foundations they built. All of it rendered irrelevant by a decision, by a man standing at a gate, weighing his options, and choosing to turn a key. The Great Wall of China was not a defense. It was a performance of defense. And the audience, emperors, dynasties, historians, and every government that has cited it as a model since, believed the performance so completely that they never stopped to read the record behind it. The record is not kind. Vast, silent, the landscape around it empty. Beautiful, indifferent. What you were taught about the Great Wall is not a lie, exactly. It's something more dangerous than a lie. It's an incomplete truth, polished until it shines, trimmed of everything inconvenient, and handed down so many times that the trimming became invisible. What was trimmed? The bankrupted dynasties, the starved garrisons, the dark signal fires.
Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe to Untold History and keep discovering the past they never told.
The generals who did the math and opened the gate, and the 267 years of foreign rule that followed. Inside the wall, behind the wall, because of the wall. That part didn't make the postcard. To understand how this happened, we have to look at the one place they told us not to. In 1644, the most powerful army in Asia stood at the base of the Great Wall of China. They didn't dig under it. They didn't blast through it. They didn't go around it. They waited. And then, a gate opened from the inside. Wu Songui was a Ming dynasty general, one of the most decorated soldiers in the empire. He had spent years defending the Shanhai Pass, the northeastern gateway where the wall meets the Bohai Sea, the most strategically critical point in the entire structure. The one gate that, if breached, would open the road directly to Beijing. He knew exactly what he was doing. He swung the gate open and invited the Manchu army in. Within weeks, the Ming dynasty, The very empire that had spent 2 centuries and the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars building and reinforcing that wall was gone. Not because the wall failed structurally, because the man guarding it chose to walk away. Here's what makes this strange. The wall at that moment was arguably the most complete it had ever been. The Ming had obsessively renovated and expanded it for over 200 years. Watchtowers, beacon systems, garrison troops stationed at intervals across thousands of miles. On paper, it was the most sophisticated military barrier the ancient world had ever produced. And it fell in a single afternoon. What Wu Songui did that day wasn't a betrayal born of weakness or cowardice. It was a calculated decision. And the reasons behind it reveal something that the mythology of the Great Wall has spent centuries trying to bury. Because Wu Songui wasn't the first. He was just the most consequential. But history has a way of leaving behind traces. Traces that don't fit the story we were told. Ask anyone on the street what they know about the Great Wall of China, and the answer comes fast. It's the largest structure ever built by human hands. It stretches over 13,000 miles. It protected China from barbarian invaders for centuries. And on a clear day, you can see it from space. That last one isn't true. But the fact that billions of people believe it tells you something important about how this story was sold. The Great Wall is one of the most recognizable symbols on Earth. It appears in encyclopedias, school textbooks, travel brochures, and Hollywood films. UNESCO lists it as a World Heritage Site. China's national identity is partially built around it. Tourists from every corner of the planet make the pilgrimage to walk its stones and photograph its towers disappearing into mountain fog. The narrative is elegant, almost poetic. A civilization under constant threat from the north. From the Xiongnu, the Mongols, the Jurchen, the Manchu, decided to build something permanent. Something that said, this far and no further. Generation after generation of emperors added to it, reinforced it, extended it across deserts and mountain ridges and river valleys. The wall became the physical expression of a nation's will to survive. The Qin dynasty began the first large-scale construction around 221 BC under Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the man who unified China, the man who also buried hundreds of scholars alive and built a tomb guarded by 8,000 terracotta soldiers. He understood one thing above all else. Power requires spectacle, and the wall was the greatest spectacle of the ancient world. Over the following centuries, each dynasty added its own sections. The Han expanded it westward. The Sui rebuilt and extended it at catastrophic human cost. But it was the Ming dynasty, ruling from 1368 to 1644, that built the version we recognize today. The brick-and-mortar wall. The one with the watchtowers and crenellated parapets. The one on the postcards. The Ming poured everything into it. Hundreds of thousands of workers, military conscripts, convicted criminals, peasants pulled from their fields. Historians estimate that during the most intensive construction periods, the wall consumed the labor of nearly 1 million people simultaneously. Some of them never came home. There is a Chinese saying that has echoed through generations. The wall was built on the bones of the men who built it. Archaeologists have found human remains embedded inside the wall's foundations. Whether myth or fact, the image stuck because it felt true. And in return for all of that sacrifice, for all of that blood and stone and imperial treasure, China got security. That was the deal. That was the story. A nation that built the impossible, in exchange for the one thing every dynasty craved above all else: protection. There is only one problem with that story. The wall never actually delivered it. If you look at the surface, it makes sense, but the moment you scratch that surface, the whole thing starts to bleed. Here is a fact that rarely makes it into the textbooks. Genghis Khan never broke through the Great Wall. He didn't need to. In 1211 AD, the most feared military commander in human history rode toward China with an army that had already swallowed half of Asia. The wall stood in his way. Watchtowers lit their signal fires, garrisons prepared, and for a brief moment, it looked like the wall might actually do what it was built to do. Then a local official opened a gate and let him through. His name was Jia Shidao, a border administrator, not a general, not a warlord. A bureaucrat who calculated that cooperation with the Mongols was more survivable than resistance. He made his choice. The wall, thousands of miles of it, decades of construction, the labor of hundreds of thousands of men, was bypassed in an afternoon. By a gate. By a decision. The BBC, in its documentary coverage of Mongol expansion into China, noted something that military historians have understood for decades, but popular culture has consistently ignored. The Great Wall was breached not through force, but through the chronic failure of the human systems responsible for manning and maintaining it. Garrison soldiers went unpaid for months. Local commanders operated without reliable supply chains. Officers facing an overwhelming enemy force made rational, if devastating, choices. The wall didn't fail because it was poorly engineered. It failed because stone doesn't make decisions. People do. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Military historian Peter Lorge, whose work on Chinese warfare is among the most cited in the field, has documented a pattern that repeats itself across every major dynasty that relied on the wall as a primary defense strategy. The structure created a dangerous illusion of security. Emperors invested in stone instead of soldiers, in walls instead of diplomacy, in spectacle instead of strategy. The wall gave the court something to point to, something visible, something monumental, something that said, "We are protected," while the actual army rotted. In the decades before the Mongol invasion, the Jin dynasty, the northern Chinese state that controlled the wall at the time, had slashed military spending, underpaid its border garrisons, and neglected the very soldiers tasked with defending the structure. The wall was immaculate. The men inside it were desperate. When Genghis Khan arrived, he didn't conquer the wall. He conquered the people behind it. And 4 centuries later, when the Ming dynasty faced the Manchu threat in 1644, the exact same pattern had repeated itself. The wall was at its most complete. The empire behind it was at its most fractured. Soldiers unpaid, generals resentful. A peasant rebellion raging in the interior while the court argued about ritual protocol. Wu Sangui didn't open that gate out of nowhere. He opened it because the empire he was supposed to defend had already abandoned him. The wall wasn't a shield. It was a monument to the belief that a wall could replace everything a shield actually requires. And somewhere in the imperial court, someone always knew that. We aren't just looking at a mistake anymore. We are looking at a pattern. Let's talk about money. Because the Great Wall didn't just fail militarily. It nearly bankrupted every dynasty that built it. The Ming dynasty's obsession with wall construction is one of the most extensively documented cases of strategic self-destruction in Chinese history. At the peak of their renovation campaigns in the 15th and 16th centuries, the imperial court was diverting an estimated 20 to 30% of total state revenue directly into wall construction and maintenance. Not defense spending broadly, not military salaries, not food reserves or flood infrastructure. The wall specifically. Historian John Mann, whose research on the Ming construction campaigns draws from imperial treasury records and provincial tax documentation, calculated that the total human cost of the wall's most intensive building period, roughly 1368 to 1505, involved the forced conscription of somewhere between 300,000 and 1 million laborers annually. These were not volunteers. They were farmers pulled from their land during harvest season, soldiers diverted from active frontier defense, convicted criminals worked until they died. Families received no compensation. Villages lost their working-age men for years at a time. The agricultural output of entire northern provinces collapsed. Famine followed. And the wall kept going up. The BBC's documentary series on Chinese imperial history made a point that deserves to be said plainly. The Ming Wall construction program didn't strengthen the empire's northern border. It systematically weakened the empire's interior. The tax burden required to fund it drove peasant resentment to breaking point. The labor conscription destroyed rural economies. The military resources redirected toward construction left actual frontier garrisons chronically understaffed. The wall was consuming the very civilization it was built to protect. And then there is the question of what the wall actually stopped. The answer, documented across multiple invasion events, is almost nothing that mattered. CNN's historical coverage of Chinese border defense noted what archaeologists and military scholars have confirmed through battlefield records and imperial dispatches. In every major invasion that succeeded against a wall-defending dynasty, the primary method of penetration was not force. It was negotiation, bribery, or internal defection. The Xiongnu, the nomadic confederation the earliest walls were built to stop, regularly bypassed fortified sections by identifying ungarrisoned gaps. Stretches of wall existed on maps that had never been fully built. Others had been built but never staffed. The signal beacon system, designed to alert garrisons along the wall when an attack was incoming, depended entirely on soldiers being present to light the fires. When soldiers weren't there, and increasingly they weren't, the beacons stayed dark. Invaders walked through silence. And this is where it gets interesting. The Ming court knew. Imperial records from the mid-1500s contain repeated memorials from frontier generals explicitly warning the emperor that the wall was understaffed, that garrison soldiers hadn't been paid in months, that supply lines were broken. These weren't anonymous complaints. They were formal state documents submitted to the throne. The court filed them and kept building. Here is the moment the puzzle completes. The Ming dynasty is collapsing from within. A peasant rebellion led by Li Zicheng has taken Beijing. The emperor has hanged himself from a tree in the imperial garden rather than face capture. The Manchu army is at the wall. Wu Songui commands the Shanhai Pass, the single most critical gate in the entire structure. He has troops. He has position. He has the wall behind him. He also has a father held hostage by the rebel forces inside Beijing, and a woman he loved taken by the rebel commander. Wu Songui opened the gate, not for the Manchu, against the rebels. He invited one invader in to destroy another. The wall. 2,000 years of construction, millions of lives, the financial ruin of dynasties, was used as a door. The Manchu walked through. The Ming ended. And the Qing dynasty, foreign, Manchu, the very people the wall was designed to keep out, ruled China for the next 267 years. From inside the wall. We are still living in the shadow of this decision. We just stopped noticing the darkness. We like to think that history's great mistakes belong to the past, that we've learned, that we build differently now, that we are smarter than the emperors. We aren't. The Great Wall of China is the oldest and most expensive argument for border security ever constructed. and for 500 years it has been cited, explicitly, repeatedly, without irony, as proof that physical barriers work, that walls protect, that if you build it high enough, wide enough, long enough, the threat stays on the other side. Politicians still make this argument today, with the same confidence the Ming court had in 1550, while their garrisons went dark. Contemporary news footage of modern border wall debates on the right. No text. Let the image speak. The pattern the Great Wall established is not ancient history. It is a template that has been copied with remarkable consistency across every century since. Build the visible thing. Underfund the invisible thing. Point to the structure when questioned. Ignore the humans behind it. The Ming court didn't fail because they were stupid or uniquely corrupt. They failed because the wall gave them something intoxicating, a physical answer to an abstract problem. Security is invisible. A wall is not. You can photograph a wall. You can stand on it. You can show it to your citizens and say, "Look what we built for you." What you cannot photograph is a well-paid, well-supplied, well-commanded frontier garrison operating on sound strategic intelligence. That doesn't make a good monument, so it doesn't get funded, and the wall goes up instead. Smiling faces, perfect light, the stones immaculate behind them. Here is the other cost that never appears in the textbooks. The Great Wall mythology didn't just waste resources. It actively prevented better solutions from being developed and implemented. During the very centuries the Ming were pouring everything into wall construction, other strategies were available. Diplomatic alliances with northern tribal confederations had worked for earlier dynasties. Mobile cavalry units operating beyond the wall had proven effective against Mongol-style warfare.